Hello, sorry for the later video, it is hard for me to make these and cover a lot of footage in such a short period of time, but I'm going to anyways. This episode covers the first movie and all of season 3. So with that comes my warning, yes, this is a fanfiction and as such this probably would never be what happens, but screw it, I would like to imagine this is how it would happen. This is written by me, all images were made either using AI, or Google Images, and if you have any what ifs you want me to do let me know. With that being said, let the first movie, also known as Two Heroes, and season 3 begin. All Might invites Deku to Island, as he would feel bad about what he said to Deku long ago and to get him out of the spotlight of the vigilante drama. Although Deku still has to use some vigilante gear because many of his gear was still being repaired from the final exam. Deku would meet Melissa would ask what Deku's quirk is and he would reply none, and that he is quirkless. Melissa would be surprised and intrigued, taking All Might and Deku to Dave's lab. Melissa would look at a TV and see Deku on the TV and realize that he's that Deku, and show him the hero item saying, "This kind of gear will help you, as you seem to use technology a lot." From there they met, Uraraka, Momo, and Jiro, while there. And a little later meeting Mineta, and Kaminari, along with Ida. Eventually seeing all of his classmates at the expo. Deku would then participate in the race to destroy the robot. Deku would use his grapples to scale the mountain, and with his metal gloves from his vigilante gear he would be able to destroy the robots in one punch, getting a solid 17 seconds, being a second behind the original time. Melissa would give Deku metal gauntlets that would allow Deku to hit harder than the flimsy gloves he had before. Deku added his grappling hooks onto the wrists of the gauntlets and he was good to go. Putting them under his suit, as he isn't going anywhere without some kind of gear anymore after Shigaraki attacks him. All of a sudden the island will go under lockdown. Midoryia would learn about the takeover. Midoryia would tell everyone, switching to his vigilante personality, saying in a serious way, "I will save them, after all I have my grapples and these gauntlets," but Melissa will interject and say that we should focus on getting the buildings back to before. With that the whole class joins together, to save everyone. Deku would notify All Might, and he would wish Deku had his quirk even more. Deku would have to run up 200 floors. On floor 80, Mineta would cause an alarm to go off. Todoroki would help everyone get to the plant factory. Meeting up with Bakugo and Kirishima by accident, Todoroki would lift Deku, Momo, and Ida. Mineta would get the ladder just like the original timeline. Deku would make it to floor 130, equipping the gauntlets and would be able to destroy robots individually in one blow without hurting his arm. After a couple blows he would destroy all the robots that he needed to. Deku with Melissa and Uraraka would separate from the rest of the class. Then coming across the windmills using a Chaco's float, with Deku's grapples they would be able to climb the windmill quickly. When being blown away, Midoriya just grapples back onto the windmill, and uses them again to get to the wall. Breaking through the wall, as the gauntlets were just enough to help him break the concrete. Deku would then meet face with the criminals, comboing them using grapples to gain momentum along with his gauntlets. Unfortunately he would get stuck by the two gun men. Deku uses his grapples to grab one of the guns from them and shoot them both in the legs. Melissa would say that's not very hero-like, and Deku would reply, "It's very vigilante-like." Deku would strap the gun against his back and keep running as he realizes without a quirk he might need a little extra kick. Deku would sneak his way into the storage with Melissa and encounter David. Revealing himself as the true villain, and the prototype quirk enhancer item. Deku would realize this was all for All Might, and while he knew All Might's power was weakening even more, but before that he would meet the metal-bending criminal that would pin him to the wall. Seeing a triple cross in action, Deku would start to bend the metal out of pure willpower to save Dave and Melissa, sending a grapple colliding with the metal bender's chest, pulling him toward Midoriya. While he jumped at him, Deku would begin to smash the boulders being flung at him, before fleeing to go after Dave to make sure he is safe. Deku would see the metal bender, first attempting to shoot him which gets blocked, and from there he grapples onto the boulders. To get above the incoming attacks, Deku would be vastly outmatched however, but not giving up he would grapple onto a now moving helicopter, that the villains were on, unbalancing it, climbing up, then getting shot with a bullet, falling breaking his back, All Might would appear and save the day like normal. Deku would be unable to get up, and call All Might over to him, and ask if he could only temporarily borrow one for all. All Might said it might be possible, while dodging the many attacks, and All Might said quick use this blood, I'm not sure if it will work or not, but we will see. Deku would then temporarily have the power of one for all. Deku would jump into the metal heap at 100% power of OFA, breaking his legs instantly, and using his gauntlet along with All Might. Deku would punch the villain after seeing All Might captured, breaking the gauntlet in the process. Deku would use a 100% Detroit smash along with All Might to destroy the villain. After doing so, falling unconscious due to his body not being used to the quirk. Everyone would wonder how Midoriya did that, but wouldn't ask too much because Deku did get knocked out. Deku would wake up in the hospital, with everyone around him wondering if he is okay. Deku would notice his injuries are healed, and realize he can't use one for all anymore. All Might would tell him after everyone left that due to how it was exchanged it was only temporary, and asked how it felt. Midoriya said, "Let's not do that again," with a smile, but back in the present everyone would ask questions on how he was able to do what he did, and Deku would say he has no idea, and leave things at that. Speaking to Melissa in private, asking her to make those gauntlets again whenever possible, she questions him asking why. He replies they were useful, besides even I can't make those, Midoriya says with a smile. With that the movie ends. Season 3 would begin with the villains discussing who they are going to capture from the camp, deciding on 2 targets, Bakugo, and Midoriya, as his vigilante status being everywhere is a great playing chip, and All for One has an interest in the boy. We cut to Midoriya going to swim, with Kananari, Mineta, and the rest of the class. Eventually leading to a race, which without any gear, he would be beaten by Ida, but still beat everyone else, as he is still strong. Deku would realize that he won't be able to do as well without his gear as all of it is destroyed, whether from the previous island experience or the final exams. As a result, Midoriya decides to create a watch with a SOS, GPS, and other minor gear, including a highly concentrated laser that would allow him to cut through any hard surface, realizing he might need it if there is something he can't punch through, as he doesn't have gear to power up his punches. With that, Deku ends up talking Uraraka before going on the bus, ending up with them becoming even better friends, along with Midoriya sitting next to Ida becoming better friends with him. Deku meets the wild pussy cats, and Koda, who eyes Midoriya in a bad way, which Midoriya notes. From there the pussy cats send the gang into the woods, being forced to run to the camp. Encountering an earth monster, saving Mineta before he gets crushed. Deku then uses his watch to cut through the monster, as he could sneak it in as it was inconspicuous with his uniform. Deku then begins to run through the forest, dodging the many monsters instead of fighting them, as he realizes they are made of literal stone and it won't be a good idea to damage himself early on. Eventually he finds one he can't dodge, so he uses his watch to take out the legs from the creature. Eventually everyone makes it to the camp. The pussy cat seems to take a particular interest in the vigilante and his skills with little to no resources. From there Koda sees Midoriya and punches him in the balls, ouch. From there they go to dinner with Midoriya eating more than ever and noticing Koda leave. Just like before, Koda knocks Mineta off the wall, and Midoriya saves him from falling, with Midoriya hurting his arms from such a velocity. Midoriya learns that Koda's parents died. Just like before, he would become determined to be friends with the young boy. Midoriya would then begin training, in particular martial arts training with Pilobody along with other Class 1A students, learning the cat style of combat. Deku would be a curry master, as to him it's just like making gear. Midoriya would find Koda going off alone and follow him to give him food. Koda would say it's dumb that he is improving his quirk, and he would tell Koda that he is quirkless and tell him to hear him out about the water hose heroes. Koda would be much more open to Midoriya because of his quirklessness, but still reject him. The next day begins with Deku doing more martial arts. Deku then proceeds to do the scaring contest, with Deku being alone. The villain attack then begins when Midoriya is alone. Realizing Kota is also probably alone, he goes after him, with Kota running into Muscular, the killer of his parents. Midoriya would jump in saving Kota. Midoriya would turn on his GPS pinging Aizawa, beginning the battle with Muscular breaking Deku's arm. Deku is forced to take attacks. Deku blasts Muscular with a beam, but it can't break through the muscles. Deku then takes more punches. Kota then throws a rock at Muscular to distract him. Deku then blasts Deku in the back of the head with his laser. Muscular then turns around, and comes at Midoriya. Midoriya throws his watch at Kota, telling him to get out of there. Deku then climbs on the wall to attempt to dodge, back-flipping off said wall to dodge another punch. Muscular lunges at Deku again, with Deku grabbing his punch throwing him to the ground. From there Kota begins to flee. By that time Muscular gives Midoriya a full power punch. Deku tries to match it but fails, getting knocked out after. Muscular looks around but can't find Kota. While disappointed he says, "Well, I at least got this kid," putting Midoriya over his shoulder, taking him to the meeting spot. We cut to Deku waking up in a bar with Bakugo next to him unconscious. Deku would look up to see Shigaraki. When he asks Deku if he would want to join the League of Villains, Deku of course says, "Heck no." Then Shigaraki tries to convince Deku, even offering him a quirk, as Shigaraki would try to relate to Deku, saying we all had problems, in some way just like you being quirkless. Deku then acts like he will join them. Then Bakugo wakes up and shouts at him. Deku would get pissed, and say, "Wow. You ruined my plan." All for One would come in on the intercom, and say, "What if you had no choice, Deku?" Deku would ask, "What do you mean?" All for One would say, "We know where your mother is, and if you don't join us, we might do some bad things to her." Shigaraki says that's probably not the best way, but before he finishes All for One says, "As for fairness, I will give you some quirks." Deku realizes and says, "So I have no choice, huh?" All for One says, "Correct, come to me Midoriya," as a weird goop envelopes Midoriya, with Bakugo shouting, "Deku." The mission goes pretty well like before. Ida makes up for the lack of Deku, with Bakugo saving himself. While normally he wouldn't leave, he realizes he doesn't know where Midoriya could end up. There are still many conferences about UA, with another kid missing, but many think Deku somehow became a vigilante again, among other thoughts. Eventually everyone except Class 1A forgot about Deku. After all, he was quirkless, right? A couple weeks later, the provisional license exam begins, with Aizawa meeting up with Mrs. Joke, and telling her why he only has 19 students, but then she points out, "Really, because there are 20 students signed up in your class." Aizawa is confused and tells her to hand the list over. When she does, Aizawa is shocked and it says Midoriya is checked in. He starts running to the check-in counter, and demands to see the security footage, and from there he sees a red-hooded boy, with what Aizawa assumes to be his kinetic gauntlets from the sports festival and an abundance of other gear. Aizawa then notifies Class 1A about the appearance of Deku, them being just as shocked as Aizawa. But then they hear that the exam is going to begin, and Class 1A walks into the box. When Class 1A sees the red-suited kid, Uraraka asks, "Deku?" The boy responds, "Please stay away from me, I don't want any of you to get hurt, this is his will." Before any of them can respond, the exam begins. Immediately an onslaught of balls are flung toward them. Deku winds up his arms, blasting kinetic energy in front of him. The class wonders what is that gonna do, but all of a sudden the beams twist and turn, deflecting every ball coming toward the class. Deku then says in a low growl, "You all went for the wrong class, because you all are gonna lose." Deku then, with great speed at an exponential strength, then jumps toward the enemies, and at great speed is able to tag several kids at once. Uraraka says, "That's not normal." The student in a gyro uses lock-on with Class 1A, with them defending themselves. Then Yoshindo activates his quirk Tremoring Earth. Deku is then separated from the rest of the class, coming face to face with Toga. He addresses her, "Toga, what are you doing here?" She says, "Ah, you figured it out already. Well, I'm here to make sure you do your best." For Shigaraki, Deku then says, "You mean All for One?" But before she can answer, they get interrupted by the rest of the classes. Deku walks forward, "You want my best? Fine, you'll get my best." Deku then with his gauntlets blasts a ball, lighting it on fire. then at full strength throws it. All of a sudden the ball starts curving, hitting kids' targets at full speed. By the end all 30 kids near Deku were hit, most of them fleeing afterward. Toga then says, "We will fight later, you're in a bit of bind, catch you later darling," fleeing from the battle. With an announcement saying Deku has passed the exam. Allowing Deku to leave back to the lobby, there he watches carefully, but then he is interrupted by all.
Aizawa.
"So where have you been?" says Aizawa. Deku says, "I'm sorry, I can't tell you much, otherwise he will get mad." Aizawa asks, "Who is he?" Deku responds, "You know exactly who he is."
Our biggest enemy.
His expression widens, all for one. Deku says, "Yeah, currently I'm stuck doing what he wants. He wants me to do this exam to test how much more power I have since his gift." Aizawa asks, "Gift? You mean quirk?" Deku corrects him, "Quirks, although I'm not allowed to say what they are. I'm being as obvious as possible to make sure you all get the picture, as I'm in a bit of a bind. After this exam, I'm not planning on returning to class 1A for you all and my mom." Aizawa asks, "Your mom?" Deku whispers, "Too much," before saying, "I must go now, I will be doing the saving portion as well, I need that license," before walking away. After all of class 1A passes, as everyone would find a way to make it, as they have great intuition. Everyone approaches Deku, asking him where he has been. Deku says, "I'm sorry, but currently I'm your enemy. For the sake of my loved ones, I must stay away from you. Eventually you will all have to defeat me and kill me, but right now you aren't be able to, not even Todoroki or Bakugo stand a chance. Get strong and defeat me." Before walking away, just like how he did with Aizawa. With that the rescue exams happen, and the timeline is the same as before, other than Deku being alone. After getting the license, Aizawa walks up to him. "So what are you going to do with that vigilante?" Aizawa asks. Deku says, "I don't know, my master told me to get it, although I'm not sure Before Deku finishes, he blanks for a second, and says, "I have to go, I wish I can be a hero, but in the state I'm in, that's impossible, because if I disobey him, everyone will die," before attempting to run off. Before Aizawa erases his quirks, and says, "So you finally have one, or two, or more. And let me guess, all for one have these quirks and is currently controlling you, with you agreeing originally to become his guinea pig for some reason. If we are assuming loved ones, your mother, as she wasn't home when we went there to check, so I can only assume he had your mother over you." Deku snarls, "Damn, you got them all right, but again I have to go." Before Deku activates his grapples, and before Aizawa can stop him, he grapples away. While this happens, All Might meets with All for One, where All Might asks, "Where is Deku?" All for One responds, "He's with class 1A right now." "Oh wait, he left, he must have passed." All Might asks, "Pass? Wait, you let him free?" All for One says, "And don't worry, he will become the most powerful hero ever," and then he begins chuckling, or villain, or even vigilante. I don't know what he will do next. He's slowly breaking free, but at the same time I'm slowly breaking him, so I guess we will see who breaks first. All Might says, "I believe he will break you, and my class will break your little boy, Shigaraki," before leaving. If you like this what if, like, comment and subscribe. These videos might take longer to get out as I did not write the entire story when the channel was released, only the first 2 episodes, which has much less than the rest of the series.